The lab technician's hands trembled as he read the results a third time. The paper was shaking. His voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke into the silent room. It was a match. A perfect, undeniable, 99.9% match. And the woman standing at the center of that marble foyer, wearing a housekeeper's uniform 3 sizes too tight and holding a feather duster like a shield, was the last person anyone in that room had expected to hear those words about. Especially not him. Not the man in the black suit standing by the tall arched window, whose stillness had gone from cold to something else, entirely something dangerous. But to understand how a soft-spoken, plus-size housekeeper named Elena Marsh ended up at the center of a Mafia DNA test in the middle of the Vittori estate, we have to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to the mornings when Elena still believed she was invisible. Elena had worked for the Vittori household for 2 years and 3 months. She counted the months the way lonely people count small things. She was 31 years old, with a full round face and a soft double chin. She tried to hide behind loose collars. Her arms were heavy and strong from lifting linens and polishing silver. Her body was wide and generous, her hips broad, her bust full beneath her plain gray uniform. She was a large woman, and she had made peace, or something close to peace, with the fact that most people looked past her. She was easier to ignore than to see. She had grown up in a small town outside the city. Her mother had died when she was 6. Her father had died when she was 19. She had no siblings, at least none she knew about, and no living relatives she could name. She had worked as a hospital custodian, then as a hotel maid, then as a nanny for a family that moved to another country and left her a good reference and nothing else. The Vittori job had come through an agency, and she had been so grateful for the wage that she had not asked too many questions about the family. She should have asked. The Vittori estate sat behind iron gates on 12 acres of manicured land. The main house was a pale stone mansion with tall windows and cold marble floors that Elena polished on her knees 3 days a week. The other staff called the head of the household Signore. Never his first name, never anything else. He was tall, in his early 40s, with dark hair going silver at the temples and a face that never smiled. He was impossibly handsome, in the way granite statues were handsome. Beautiful and unmoving. His name was Dante Vittori, and he was, though Elena did not know it in words she could say out loud, the most feared man in the city. Dante Vittori ran the Vittori family. Not the wine business, not the shipping company. The other family. The one people did not name at dinner parties. He was the quiet king of an empire that stretched from the docks to the boardrooms, and he had inherited it at 26, after his father was killed and his older brother disappeared. 12 years he had ruled, and in 12 years he had never once lost a battle. He was called the Silent King because he rarely spoke, and when he did, the words became law. Elena knew none of this. She only knew that Signore Vittori drank his coffee, black, preferred the library curtains, half drawn, and always paused when he passed her in the hallway. Just for a second. Just long enough that her heart tripped in her chest, and she would drop her eyes to the floor and mumble, "Good morning," and he would nod once and walk on. She thought he paused because he was checking whether she had dusted properly. She was wrong. Dante Vittori had noticed Elena Marsh on her first day. He had been standing at the top of the grand staircase, and she had been in the foyer. A nervous new hire, with a canvas bag over her shoulder, and a smile she kept trying to steady. He had watched her set the bag down and reach out to steady a crystal vase that the wind from the open door had rocked. She had caught it before it fell. She had not known anyone was watching. She had let out a small breath of relief and then apologized to the vase, quietly, as if the vase might have feelings. Dante had stood at the top of the stairs for a long time after she was led away by the head housekeeper. He had not been able to explain to himself, then, or in the 27 months that followed, why he did not look away from Elena Marsh. He was a man who had loved once, badly, when he was young, and who had decided long ago that men in his position did not get to love. They got to rule. They got to protect. They got to be alone. It was the price. And yet every morning, without planning it, he found himself in the east hallway at 7 o'clock, because that was when Elena polished the console table there, that day. Every evening, without meaning to, he took his brandy in the library, because that was when Elena closed the curtains. He did not speak to her beyond nods. He did not touch her. He watched her work with her sleeves pushed up and her hair falling out of its bun, and he felt something in his chest loosen and then tighten, and he did not know what to do with it. He had run background checks on her. 3 of them. She was exactly what? She appeared to be white, sad, and a quiet, kind, overlooked woman, with no family and no secrets, working hard and going home to a small apartment where she kept a cat named Biscuit and cooked her own dinners because she could not afford takeout. He had raised her salary twice without telling her. The head housekeeper had thought it was a bookkeeping error the first time, and had asked. Dante had said only, "Do not mention it to her." The head housekeeper, who had worked for the family for 30 years, and who knew a great many things she did not say, had bowed her head and never mentioned it again. His right hand, a lean, sharp-eyed man named Marco Bellini, who had been at Dante's side since they were both 15, had noticed everything. Marco noticed everything. It was his job. And one evening, over cigars on the terrace, Marco had said, "So, boss, are you going to talk to her? Or are we all going to keep pretending you don't rearrange the world so she can dust it in peace?" Dante had not answered. He had stared at the garden and taken a long pull of his cigar. Marco had smiled to himself and let it go. For now, that was the state of things when the trouble began. It began, as many terrible things do, at a dinner party. Dante's cousin was in town. His name was Raffaele Vittori, and he was everything Dante was not. Loud, vain, cruel in small, showy ways. He was the son of Dante's uncle, and he had grown up believing that the Vittori name entitled him to whatever he wanted. He was 29, sharp-jawed, expensively dressed, and utterly convinced that he should have been the one to inherit the family. Not his quiet cousin, Raphael, had come for the weekend under the pretense of family business. In truth, he was there because his father, Uncle Salvatore, had a plan. And Uncle Salvatore, who had been passed over 12 years ago when Dante was named head of the family, had never stopped waiting for his moment. The dinner was a small one. 12 guests, business associates, an old family friend, 2 lawyers. Elena had been asked to help serve because one of the regular servers had called in sick. She had put on her cleanest uniform and pinned her hair back, and tried very hard not to knock over anything expensive. Raphael had been drinking since noon. He noticed Elena the second time she circled the table with the wine. He watched her hips move in the narrow space between chairs, and he smiled, the kind of smile that had nothing to do with kindness. She felt his eyes on her and her hand shook, and she gripped the bottle harder. Dante saw everything. He was seated at the head of the table, and, though his face did not change, Marco, standing quietly against the wall behind him, saw his boss's knuckles go white around his water glass. Raphael leaned back in his chair as Elena reached to refill his glass. "Careful," he said loudly, in a voice designed to carry. "You wouldn't want to break another one. You know how much these glasses cost? More than you make in a month, I'd bet." The table went quiet. Elena's face burned. She had not broken anything. She had never broken anything in 27 months of service. But she did not correct him. She only said quietly, "I'm sorry, signore," and finished pouring. Raphael was not done. He turned in his chair to face her fully. He looked her up and down, slowly, the way a butcher looks at a carcass. "My God, cousin," he said, still loud, still smiling, "where do you find these ones? You could hide 3 normal women inside this one. Does she come with a discount for the extra tonnage?" A soft laugh from one of the lawyers. A choked breath from the woman across the table. The rest was silence. Elena's hand froze on the bottle. Her face was on fire, her eyes stung. She had been called things before. She had been laughed at before. But not like this. Not in front of Signore. Not in his house. Not while she was trying so hard to be invisible. She opened her mouth to apologize, because that was what she always did. She apologized for existing when other people were cruel. Was a reflex older than her memory. She never got to speak. Enough. The word came from the head of the table. It was not loud. Dante Vittori did not raise his voice. He never had to. The single word landed on the table like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples reached every corner of the room. Raphael's smile flickered. "Come on, cousin," he began. "It was only a—" "Enough," Dante said again. This time, he set down his water glass. The click of the crystal against the wood was the loudest sound in the room. He turned his head slowly and looked at his cousin, and Raphael, who had been drinking since noon and who was still a Vittori by blood, went pale. "You will apologize to Miss Marsh," Dante said, and his voice was terrifyingly calm. "Or you will leave this house tonight, and you will not return." The silence stretched. Raphael's throat worked. He looked at the guests. See. He looked at his own hands. He looked at Elena, and something ugly flickered in his face. But he was not brave enough to test his cousin on his own ground. "Not yet, my apologies," he said tightly, to Elena's shoes. It was a joke. "It was not," Dante said. "Marco, escort Miss Marsh to the kitchen. She is finished for the evening. See to it that she has a car home. And paid leave for the week." Marco stepped forward from the wall. Elena had not moved. She was still holding the wine bottle. Her hands were shaking so hard the wine was rocking in the neck of the bottle. Marco gently took it from her. "This way, ma'am," he said, and his voice was kinder than she had ever heard from any of Signore's men. She let herself be led out. She did not see the look Dante gave his cousin after the door closed behind her. Raphael saw it. Raphael did not sleep well that night. In the kitchen, Elena sank onto a stool by the counter and tried very hard not to cry in front of Marco. She failed. The tears came silent and hot, and she pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and whispered, "I'm so sorry. Please tell Signore, I'm so sorry. I don't want to lose the job, Miss Marsh," Marco said. He crouched down so he was eye level with her. "Listen to me. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all. Do you understand?" She shook her head because she did not. Marco smiled a little. "Someday," he said, "you will come. The car is waiting." That should have been the end of it. It was not. Raphael Vittori went home that night with a bruised ego and a plan he did not fully understand yet, because the plan was not truly his. The plan belonged to his father, Uncle Salvatore, who had been waiting 12 years for a lever big enough to move his nephew off the throne. Raphael called his father from the car. He told him everything. He told him about the housekeeper. He told him about the way Dante had looked at him. He told him about the way Dante had looked at her. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Salvatore said, "Oh. Oh. This is interesting." Raphael, listen to me very carefully. 2 weeks passed. Elena returned to work on Monday, quiet and small, expecting to be dismissed. She was not. Signor Vittori was not in the house that week. She was told he was traveling on business. She scrubbed the floors and dusted the console table and tried not to think about the dinner, and every night she went home to biscuit and cried a little and ate her soup and told herself it was over. It was not over. It was only beginning. In the 3rd week a lawyer came to the house. He was not one of the Vittori lawyers. He was a stranger in a cheap suit with a briefcase and a nervous smile. He asked to see the housekeeper named Elena Marsh. He said it was a personal matter, that he had been trying to find her for some time, that it was good news. He said the word inheritance. Elena was called into the small parlor. She sat on the edge of the velvet chair, her hands folded tight in her lap, and she listened. As the lawyer explained that a distant relative on her mother's side had died and left her a small sum of money, and more importantly, a request. A DNA sample for genealogical records. Just a swab. Nothing invasive. It was traditional, he said, in this particular family. To verify the line. Elena did not have a distant relative on her mother's side that she knew of. But she also did not know very much about her mother's side. Her mother had died young. Her mother had been an only child. Or so Elena had been told. Her mother's parents were long gone. Elena had accepted the emptiness of her family tree, the way some people accept a bad back. It was just how things were. The lawyer was very kind. He was very reassuring. He said the sample would be handled by an independent lab. He said it would take only a moment. He said, and here he smiled with all his teeth, that there was a small stipend just for participating. $500. Would that be all right? Ileana, who owed rent and whose cat needed a vet visit, said yes. She let the lawyer swab the inside of her cheek. He sealed the swab in a plastic tube. He shook her hand. He left. She went back to polishing the console table, and did not think about it again for 4 days. On the 5th day, Dante Vittori returned to the estate. He came home late in the evening. Marco met him at the door. Marco's face was carefully neutral, which meant that something was very wrong. "Boss," Marco said quietly, "we have a problem." They spoke in the study for an hour. When Marco was done, Dante Vittori sat very still behind his desk. His hands were folded on the leather blotter. His face did not change. But Marco, who had known him for 23 years, saw the small muscle jump in his jaw, and knew that somewhere in the city someone was about to have a very bad week. "Tell me again," Dante said quietly, slowly. Marco told him again. "A lawyer, not one of ours, had approached Miss Marsh in your absence. He obtained a DNA sample from her under the pretext of an inheritance. There is no inheritance. The lawyer works through 3 shell companies for your Uncle Salvatore. The DNA sample was submitted to a private lab yesterday. It was submitted alongside a second sample." "Yours, mine," Dante repeated. His voice was flat. Marco nodded. "Your uncle has been collecting samples of yours for years. It would not have been difficult. A wine glass, a cigar, something." "And the purpose," Dante said, though Marco could see in his eyes that he already knew. Marco took a breath. "Boss, your uncle is going to claim that Miss Marsh is your daughter." The silence in the study was absolute. Dante Vittori did not move. He did not blink. Marco, who had seen his boss face down, armed men without flinching, watched the color drain slowly from his face. "That is not possible," Dante said. "I know," Marco said gently. "I know it is not." "She is my age," Dante said. "She is 31. I am 42. It is mathematically impossible." Marco said nothing. He waited. Slowly, Understanding rose in Dante's eyes. "It is not about the truth," he said. "It is about the doubt." "Yes," Marco said. "Under the family bylaws, no head of family could sit while an unresolved paternity claim hung over him. It was an old rule. From an older time it had been written to protect the family from bastard heirs and scandal. It had never been meant to be used like this. But Salvatore had waited 12 years, and he had found his lever. If he could produce a DNA test claiming Elena Marsh was Dante's daughter, even a fraudulent one, the family council would be required to convene. They would be required to investigate. They would be required to suspend Dante from his position while the investigation proceeded. And in the vacuum, Salvatore would move. But more than that. Worse than that. If Elena was believed, even briefly, to be Dante's daughter, then everything Dante felt for her, everything he had spent 27 months not saying, would become monstrous. The whispers alone would destroy her. And Dante Vittori, who had built a life of quiet stone around his heart, understood, with sudden savage clarity, that he could bear anything except her being hurt. "Where is the sample now?" he said. "At the lab. Results expected in 72 hours. "Which lab?" Marco named it. Dante stood. "Buy it," he said. "Boss. Buy the lab. Tonight. I do not care what it costs. And Marco," he turned, "bring me a real test, a clean chain of custody. 3 independent labs. I want the truth in writing, signed by every one of them, before Salvatore's fake report ever sees daylight." Marco was already moving. "And Marco," Dante said, his voice caught, just for a heartbeat. He turned. His boss was standing behind the desk, and for the first time in 23 years, Marco saw fear in his face. Not fear for himself, fear for her. "Do not," Dante said, "let anything happen to her. Do you understand me? Nothing. Not a scratch. Not a rumor. Nothing touches her. Nothing will," Marco said. Elena was not told any of this. She woke up on Wednesday morning and fed biscuit, and rode the bus to the Vittori estate and put on her uniform and began her rounds. She was polishing the console table when she heard the cars come up the drive. Many cars. She glanced through the tall window and saw 4 black sedans in a neat line. Men in suits were getting out. Some of them she recognized. Most she did not. The head housekeeper appeared at her elbow, out of breath. "Elena," she said, "come with me now." "Please." Elena followed her, confused. "What is it? What did I do?" "You did nothing. Come, Signore wants you." She was led into the grand foyer. It was full of people. Uncle Salvatore was there, a heavy-set older man, with slick gray hair and a smile like a knife. Raphael was next to him, looking pleased with himself. Behind them stood the lawyer with the cheap suit, and behind him, 4 members of the family council in their dark, formal jackets. And across from all of them, standing by the tall arched window with his hands loose at his sides, stood Signora Vittori. Elena's step slowed. The room was so quiet. Everyone was looking at her. She wanted to turn around and run. "Miss Marsh," Salvatore said warmly. "Please, come in. Don't be frightened. This concerns you." She looked at Signore. His face was unreadable. But his eyes met hers, and he gave her the smallest nod. It was enough. She walked into the room, holding her feather duster against her chest, like it could protect her. Salvatore beamed at the room. "My friends, thank you for coming on such short notice. I know this is unusual. But I have discovered something that concerns the honor of our family, and I could not, in good conscience, sit on it." He turned to his lawyer. "Please." The lawyer stepped forward. He was sweating. He held up a large envelope. "In this envelope," he said, "is a DNA test conducted by an independent laboratory. It compares samples taken from Miss Elena Marsh and from Signore Dante Vittori. The results, he said, and his voice quavered, are conclusive. He opened the envelope, he pulled out the paper. He read, "The comparison shows a 99.9% paternity match. Miss Elena Marsh is the biological daughter of Dante Vittori." The room erupted. Elena's ears rang. She did not understand. She could not understand. She looked at Signore. She looked at the lawyer. She looked at Salvatore, whose smile had become enormous. "I am so sorry, Miss Marsh," Salvatore said, coming toward her with his hands outstretched. "I am sorry you had to learn it like this, but you deserve the truth. You have family, you have a father. I don't," Elena whispered. "This is a mistake. I don't. My mother, she was." "You did not know," Salvatore said soothingly. "Of course you did not. It was covered up. It was hidden. But now, my dear, now you are home." She was shaking. She could not breathe. She looked at Signore across the room, and her heart broke in half, because if this was true, then everything, every small pause in the hallway, every polite nod, every strange warmth she had let herself imagine in his presence, was something else entirely. Something sick. Something wrong. Her stomach turned. Salvatore turned to the council. "Under the bylaws," he said grandly, "this unresolved matter requires the immediate suspension of Dante from his position, pending a full family investigation. I move that we enough." The word came from the window, just like at the dinner. Just as quiet. Every head in the room turned. Dante Vittori had not moved. He stood by the window with his hands loose at his sides, and he was looking at Elena. Only at Elena. His face had softened in a way she had never seen. There was something in his eyes she did not know how to read. But it was not shame, and it was not what a father looks at a daughter with. She did not understand it yet. She only knew that when he looked at her, the ringing in her ears began to fade. "Uncle," Dante said, still looking at Elena, "you have made a serious mistake." Salvatore's smile flickered. "Nephew, the test is fraudulent," Dante said. He turned then, finally, and looked at his uncle. "There is a lab," he said, "called Merrick Genomics. That is the lab your very nervous friend just quoted. Merrick Genomics was acquired 42 hours ago by a subsidiary of Vittori Holdings. Every result they have processed in the last 72 hours has been reviewed by our own technicians. Yours, particularly, has been reviewed. It is a forgery. The samples were switched. The paperwork was altered. We have the technician who did it. We have his signed confession. We have the wire transfer from your account to his." Marco stepped forward. He had a folder. He handed it to the eldest member of the family council, a white-haired man named Old Enzo, who had known Dante since he was a boy. Old Enzo opened the folder. His face darkened as he read. "Furthermore," Dante said. His eyes came back to Elena, his voice gentled, only for her. "Furthermore, I took the liberty of commissioning 3 independent tests. Real ones. Different labs, different countries, different technicians. All conducted on samples taken under verified chain of custody in the last 48 hours. Marco handed a second folder to old Enzo. "Miss Marsh," Dante said, "is not my daughter. I am 11 years older than she is. It was never possible. But more importantly, Miss Marsh's true parentage is now, thanks to my uncle's clumsy attempt at fraud, actually known." For the first time in her life, Elena's head came up. "What?" Dante's eyes were so gentle. She had never seen him gentle. She had not known he could be. "Your mother," he said quietly, "was born Isabella Corsi. Quote, end pony. She was the only daughter of Vincenzo Corsi, who owned half the vineyards in the North Country. She ran away at 19. She changed her name. She married a good man and had a good quiet life, and she died before she could tell you any of it. But her family, Elena, is one of the oldest in the country, and when they hear who you are and how you were treated and what my uncle tried to do to you, they will stand with us." Elena's knees went. She sat down abruptly on the marble step behind her. The duster fell out of her hands. Salvatore was retreating toward the door. Raphael had gone the color of paper. The lawyer was already trying to explain himself to nobody in particular. Old Enzo stood up slowly. He looked at the folders in his hands. He looked at Salvatore. His voice, when it came, was the voice of the family council, and it was terrible. "Salvatore Vittori," he said, "you have brought a false paternity claim against the head of this family. You have paid a lab technician to falsify records. You have attempted, through fraud, to seize a position not lawfully yours. Under the bylaws, you have chosen to weaponize. The penalty is stripping of name, forfeiture of assets, and permanent exile. Or, the council will meet within the hour to formalize. You will not leave this estate until we do." Salvatore's mouth opened. He looked at Raphael. Raphael looked at the floor. "Marco," Dante said, "escort my uncle and my cousin to the east salon. Post 4 men. They are not to leave." Marco nodded. 2 men who had been standing by the door stepped forward. Salvatore was led away. He did not resist. He was already an old man, and he was already, in every way that mattered, finished. Raphael went with him, silent. The council members followed. The lawyer scurried after, still babbling. Marco lingered a moment longer. He met Dante's eyes across the foyer. He gave the smallest smile. He said, "Take your time, boss." And then he too was gone. The tall arched foyer was empty. Empty except for Dante Vittori standing by the window and Elena Marsh sitting on the marble step and the feather duster on the floor between them. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Elena found her voice first. It was very small. "Signore," she said. She could not look up. "I don't understand what just happened." He crossed the floor slowly. His footsteps echoed. He stopped a careful distance from her, and then he lowered himself onto the step, so that he was sitting on the marble too, in his $3,000 suit, on the housekeeper's step. He did not seem to notice, or care. He picked up the feather duster. He set it gently across his own knee. "Elena," he said, her name. He had never said her name. She looked at him. "I owe you the truth," he said. "All of it. If you want it." She nodded. Once. She could not speak. He drew a slow breath. He looked at his hands. Then he looked at her. "I have loved you," he said, "since the day you caught the vase." Elena stopped breathing. "I did not know how to say it," he said. "I did not know if I had the right. I am not a good man, in the way that word is usually used. My hands have done things yours never would. I have run this family with an iron rule for 12 years, because that is what I was given to do. And I did not think men like me were allowed to want a woman. Like you, someone who apologizes to vases. Someone who is kind to the people no one is kind to. Someone who does not know how beautiful she is, because no one has ever in her whole life taken the time to tell her. Her eyes were full, she could not blink. I watched you for 27 months, he said. I gave you raises, I moved my mornings so I could pass you in the hallway. I bought 2 companies you would never have known about, because they were treating your old co-workers badly. I have been, in every way I know how, quietly protecting you, because it was the only way I knew how to love you, without asking anything back. She made a small sound. She did not know what the sound was. And then my cousin humiliated you in my house, he said, and his voice went very quiet. And I knew that I could no longer hide behind quiet. And then my uncle tried to hurt you and use you against me. And I knew that quiet was over forever. He held out the feather duster. She took it, blindly, because her hands did not know what else to do. You are not my daughter, Elena, he said. You have never been. You are the woman I have loved from a distance for 2 years and 3 months. And I understand if that is not what you want. I understand if I am too old, or too much, or too frightening. You owe me nothing. Nothing at all. If you want to leave this house tonight and never see me again, a car will be waiting, and you will never want for anything again as long as you live. That is a promise. He stopped. He waited. Elena looked at the man beside her. The silent king, on the marble step, in his beautiful suit, holding out a housekeeper's duster like it was a rose. The most powerful man in the city, waiting, terrifyingly still, for a soft-spoken heavy woman with a double chin and swollen eyes to answer him. You bought a lab, she said in a voice that trembled. I did, for me, for you. You gave me raises I didn't know about. 2. You watched me in the hallways. Every morning. You love me, she said, and her voice broke. I do, he said. Very much. Elena Marsh, who had been overlooked her whole life, who had made peace with a small apartment and a fat cat and soup for one, who had apologized to a vase on her first day of work, sat on a marble step next to a Mafia king in a mansion she had polished on her knees. Not for a moment, not by accident, for 27 months. Deliberately. Devotedly, with a love so quiet and so enormous that it had reshaped an empire around her without her knowing, she began to cry. Not the small, silent tears of the dinner party. Real tears. Whole-body tears. The kind of crying that a person only does when something very old and very heavy finally sets itself down. Dante did not touch her. He was a patient man. He had waited 2 years and 3 months. When she could speak again, she said, I thought I was invisible. Never, he said. Not to me. Not for a single second. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked at him. She said, I don't know how to be loved like this. I don't know how to be anything but the housekeeper. Then we will learn, he said. Together. Slowly. You will still be Elena. You do not have to become anyone else. I do not want anyone else. She nodded. She was crying and laughing at the same time. It was ridiculous. It was the best moment of her life. She said, Signore. Dante, he said. It felt strange and enormous in her mouth. Dante. I think, she said, I have loved you back for a while. I did not know I was allowed to. He closed his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them, they were wet, and she understood that she was the only person in the world who would ever be permitted to see that. He reached out. He took her hand. Pod. Her hand was much larger than most, and his hand covered it completely, and he held it as if it were a small bird he had spent his whole life trying to catch without frightening. You are allowed, he said. You are allowed everything. 6 months later, the Vittoria estate looked different. Warmer. The heavy drapes had been replaced. The library had a second armchair in it now, a wide, sturdy one made specifically for a woman who liked to read curled up sideways. There were flowers in every hall, real ones, arranged by Elena herself, because she still liked to arrange things and no one was going to tell her not to. She no longer wore the gray uniform. She wore soft dresses in deep colors, tailored beautifully to her broad shoulders and her wide hips and her full, lovely figure, made by a designer in the city who had cried actual tears when Dante had brought Elena in and said, make her feel like a queen because she is one. Salvatore Vittori was gone, stripped of name, of assets, of standing. He lived somewhere small and cold, and no one spoke of him. Raphael had been exiled to a distant business post, permitted to keep his life on the condition that he never returned to the city. The lab technician had been dealt with quietly, and the law had been involved in some places and not in others. The family council had ratified Dante's position for life. Elena's mother's family, the Corsi, had come to meet her. They had wept over her. They had brought her old photographs of a laughing young woman with Elena's exact eyes. They had told her stories. She had a family now, a real one. A large, loud Italian one, that hugged too tightly and cooked too much, and had adopted her instantly and completely. Marco had become one of her closest friends. He teased her constantly, she teased him back. He said, in front of Dante, that his boss had been unbearable for 2.5 years, and it was Elena's job now to fix him. Elena had said she was doing her best. Dante had smiled, actually smiled. Marco had almost fallen out of his chair. And on a warm evening in June, 6 months after the day on the marble step, Dante Vittori took Elena Marsh to the site of a new building in the heart of the city. It was a foundation, a shelter and job training center for domestic workers, funded entirely by the Vittori estate, staffed by trained counselors, and free forever to anyone who needed it. A place for women like Elena had been. Women who had been treated as invisible. The building's name was carved in stone above the door. The Marsh Foundation. Elena stood in front of the stone with her hand pressed to her mouth. Behind her, a small crowd had gathered. Her Corsi cousins. Marco, the head housekeeper, who was crying openly. And Dante, standing quietly at her shoulder. There was a photographer. There was a small ribbon. There was the mayor of the city, looking slightly nervous, because everyone in that city knew who Dante Vittori was. Dante turned Elena, gently, by the shoulders. He got down on one knee, there on the sidewalk, in front of the Marsh Foundation, in front of her family, and his men, and the mayor and God, and he opened a small velvet box. Elena Marsh, he said, the most patient, generous, kind-hearted woman I have ever known. The reason my empire is worth anything at all. Will you please, at long last, marry me? Elena, who had once apologized to a vase, looked down at the man who had bought a lab for her, and she nodded before she could speak, and then she said yes, out loud, over and over, and everyone was crying, even Marco, who would later deny it strenuously. Dante slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He had had it made for her, months before in secret, because he was the kind of man who prepared for every outcome, and this outcome had been, from the moment she caught that vase, the only one he had ever truly wanted. He stood. He kissed her, in front of everyone, tenderly, like she was made of glass and courage in equal measure. And Elena Marsh, once the invisible housekeeper, once the woman mocked at a dinner table for the size of her body, once the girl who had eaten soup alone in a small apartment with a fat cat, kissed him back and thought, so this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like to be seen. The lesson of this story is not that a poor woman got rescued by a rich man. That is the shallow reading. The lesson is that Dante Vittori had all the power in the world and could have loved anyone in the world. And he chose, deliberately, quietly, for 2 years and 3 months, the softest, kindest, most overlooked woman in his household. Not despite what she looked like, because of who she was. And the lesson for Elena is not that a man saved her. The lesson is that she had, in her own quiet way, been worthy of saving all along. She had been worthy the day she caught the vase. She had been worthy at the dinner table. She had been worthy on the marble step. Her worth had never depended on being seen. But being seen, finally by someone who knew how to look had let her see herself. And in a world that spends so much time telling people they are too much, or too little, or too heavy, or too quiet, or too plain to matter, that is not a small thing. It is not a small thing at all. That is the story of the heavy housekeeper who was forced to take the Mafia boss's DNA test, and of the results that shattered a conspiracy, exposed a traitor, freed a queen, and revealed a love that had been waiting, patiently, in the quiet corners of a great stone house,